Welcome back to another video on Gearsaw Studios, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build yourself a Sulfur Caves megabase, including some new ruins and extra segments. Now let's get right into it. Of course this is part 2, but if you haven't seen part 1, don't worry. This has a lot of good general building tips, so that way it's worth your time. Anyways, anytime you have a flat part of the wall here, we want to excavate in a forge or some other large structure. So let's add that. Additionally, we want to make any large structures actually use a minecart track as well. So I'm going to be building the minecart track so that way we can properly incorporate this into the new part of the structure. So we're going to have a long line for that. Start by making a small, basically railway station room. You can put in some varying chests and blocks in here. Just make sure it has a unique theme like the rest of your areas. Like how the alchemy was abandoned, the storage was very industrial, things like that. So we're going in here and we're placing down some chests. That way we can transport it to other areas in our world without having to use the elytra. Additionally, I've excavated a very large area here. This is so that way we can make the rail system look really cool, even though it doesn't go anywhere because this is a tutorial. Anyways, let's keep going. We're going to build that room, and you can see here, pretty basic idea. I'm doing a flat ceiling for now. We also have these fake boxes here in order to decorate it. And right here, we have a segment where we have ourselves some lava running under these copper grates with the rail line running on top. Because this has geysers, I wanted to incorporate a lot of hydrothermal ideas into this. So we have this here where we have ourselves some glowstone on the ceiling and we have just general good decoration. Don't forget your foliage. This whole thing is repeating for the minecart segment, and I recommend innovating your own designs. Don't forget about the ceiling though. But we have that going on, and we also have a water pumping station here, where you can see water's being pumped from black concrete, and we're using a soul sand bubble column in order to achieve that effect. Additionally, I have some cracks in the wall being made with some stone in order to put some lime wool or concrete behind it in order to make that more interesting. So it's an ore. You can also set up a little terminal there. So you can see that minecart room now connects to our forge. And we're going to have the actual minecart track have a visible ceiling into it. So we're going to continue building this out, and we need to choose a vibe. I want this to be castle-y and exempt from the whole ruined feel. Like this is something that was added in later because obviously there are two builders in this place. One, the original builders where there are ruins, and then two, the new guy who's refurbishing it and adding his own rooms. So let's have that little story woven into the build. So right here, this is a new segment, but we're using the castle-y vibe. Make sure that your flat walls have things in them to make them interesting. And then we can have little piles of stuff and general utilities. We're going to have some beams running across the ceiling for support, and we have this lava running across like it's part of the copper grates. Additionally, a lava farm right there because we're going to be putting our furnaces. Then we're going to have an overly dramatic nether portal because the nether is where all this lava is being sourced from. Thus, we should have that room seem very, very important. So for now, we have that castle vibe going, and we want to have some supports going across the top. Now, we also have the nether portal here. Anytime you do a nether portal, try to make it link up to the other side with the same vibe. And you can see an older tutorial I have here, a little nether outpost. So if you want to, try incorporating a soul sand valley aesthetic if your portal led to a soul sand valley. Of course, customize it depending on what's actually on the other side. So we have that going on, and we have a place that we can thoroughly decorate. So let's just skip right into it. So we have ourselves a small super smelter at the entrance, and we have ourselves the supports going across the top with all the sulfur. It incorporates weirdly into the rest of the base, but intentionally so, because this is the new part. We have a little forge here using some magma and a concrete gradient to make it look like it's raging fire, then a very small super smelter, so that way you can sort things. You can put a copper golem here, hence the other chest on the other side, and of course you can infinitely expand that upwards to supply more things. Then we have some piles of iron and coal, and you can see that window leading into other parts of the base. Try to make them feel incorporated. Then smithing area here, we have some anvils. Of course, your anvils should really be closer to your enchanting area, but I digress. Of course, we have that nice little gradient there, looking really high tech, and a cart here. Pause if you want to take a look, with all the iron blocks, and we have some wheels. Then, alternating gray and tinted glass for a little look into our minecart area. And then, we also have some furnaces here, where you can see it's just 8 of them, and some lava running through. So, we have all these decorations, we're making it feel very cohesive. Additionally, hanging signs. Make sure to incorporate those to make your place feel lived in. Then, if you want any more details on any of this, of course comment away. Because this is a customizable tutorial, I don't expect you to copy everything. You can just look around and see what ideas you like. But for the nether portion, we have a lot going on. We have the black stone on the bottom being gradiented into mud and then magma. Then we have geysers coming out from the lava, like it's very volatile, and then some black concrete segments where it flows into the wall. The portal itself is being incorporated into some nether fortress-like structures with fire at the top. And then we have an industrial control room overlooking this. You can also add buttons to glass to make it look reinforced. But in here you can see generic stuff going on, which is exactly what we want. It makes it look more interesting when we have these rooms with varying redstone components. Off to the side, you could also see minecarts running through. That's a very important part of the build, and you should try incorporating minecarts moving whenever you can. Then for this other segment, I wanted to get an animal farm going into here, so let's do something a little bit more modern. Like we found a castle of sorts. By the way, notice the alleyway I'm preparing. I don't do anything with it, but it's cool. You can add secret bases into your base. But anyways, we're going to have a bit of a modern sculpture here. So imagine we have some ruins, but we wanted to refurbish them, but they're like barracks or something. So we put in a steak and shake. I mean, it works well with the Cinnabar aesthetic, so let's do that. Don't be afraid to incorporate different build styles into it. So you can see here, we have the castle being built into the little cliffside here. On top, we're going to have our farm animals. But you can see how the sides, we have ourselves a little story. We're still doing some of the repairs on this and have some stairs, missing bricks. While the floor, you can see how it goes from moss to cinnabar and granite haphazardly to polished cinnabar and granite. This is a good way to show progress on the restoration of this place. Also, the castle is completely made of sulfur. Don't do completely sulfur sculptures in this. Instead, keep it consistent and use lots of cinnabar as your accent. But now we have the inside here. Working on it, we have ourselves some ceiling going on. I chose sulfur and glowstone, and then some black buttons going across the walls. You can make this a dining area. Don't forget to properly light it up though, add lanterns, torches, other things like that. Since we're going for that lava hydrothermal aesthetic, it's completely fine to make what appear to be modern lights into those other parts. On top, of course, the animal farm, we're going to have to find a way to keep the animals in. Luckily, that's pretty simple. But you can see here, to really sell that restaurant aesthetic, we have ourselves a sign, steak and stew, and we have those awnings on the outside to really give the restaurant feel. We have some seating in here, we have ourselves a cash register, no idea why, but it's kind of funny to include, and we have direct access to minecart track, continuing to incorporate it into varying parts of the build. The door can go up to somewhere, but I left mine going nowhere. Just make sure you have a proper plant in there in order to add in some life into this, because all the sterile yellows, reds, and whites, it just gets boring. So we have ourselves the animals here. They're getting stuck on varying corners. I'm not entirely sure how to prevent that, but make sure that it's inescapable. And the edges, if you don't want proper fences, honey blocks with glowstone under them and then moss carpet on top. That prevents animals from escaping because they simply cannot jump up. Hay piles also work well in order to sell the whole aesthetic there, including some feeding troughs and the cauldrons with water, things like that. So we're doing pretty well with this whole place. Now I'm going to incorporate some more ruins into it, an actual unrefurbished part of the build. Now for a segment dedicated to people who watched part 1, I started building a bedroom, but I decided to scrap it. However, there is still good that can be done with this. It was just a little too modern for my liking, and we already have that little refurbishment hut, like this is a temporary installation. Instead, you can actually add hobbit hole doors like this. Incorporating those into the sides, if you don't have time to build entire ruined sections, is a good way to make it look like that your build has more going on. So be sure to breathe some life into it with those varying ruined segments. Additionally, right here, we're going to add another one, and we can build it directly into the sulfur because there's stair variants of normal sulfur. So be sure to do that if you're also trying to flesh out your area. Pretty much any area that's too flat and doesn't have any foliage after you're done landscaping at the end of the video, you should add in some tall walls of bricks. That's very important for making sure this is a place rather than just a base. For example, you can make it look like there's a reason for it being ruined. Like right here, I have this water pool that has been incorporated into the build. I didn't cover it up. Perhaps there's part of a structure, but the floor has fallen into there. So that shows signs of age. Now, let's have a very destroyed version of the path going to the entrance of our ruins. This will be our enchanting room. So if you want further advice on how to decorate an enchanting room, you can check out this video here. But if you just want this version, then here's what we do. We're going to go in and we're going to make a little walkway, so that way we go into a less developed area of the build. These pillars here, I originally wanted them going across the ceiling, but because everyone has a different cave and my ceiling was kind of weird, I decided to abandon that in favor of doing some proper ruins. So we're going to go right through with that. These pillars here will act as a marker. You can build them into the ground in order to give a general idea of where this open air ruin is going to be. So we have that, and our place is going to be 7 blocks wide. Thus, we begin excavation on this area. So you can see here, the pillars helped us greatly, and now we have a hallway. Like this could have been a throne room, except this is a library. So now we have that going through, and what we want to do is also make sure that our build is consistent with itself. For this part, I built on a whim. You can see how we have red walls and yellow accent. Because cinnabar is a brighter and more vibrant color, we should invert this. Have the cinnabar be the accent rather than the main wall. This is just a useful tip for building in general, where for the most part, you want your darker, more vibrant things to be less used rather than your more neutral shades. Anyways, we're now in the ruins section, and here's the beginning. We can see we have a cartography table. We can decorate that with a few shelves. Also, to maintain consistency, to show that one part was refurbished and this part is still in ruins, notice how the entrance there was the same as our main entrance from part 1. Now, for the ceiling, you can see it's arched, but it collapsed in because of a sulfur overflow, or whatever that is. Then, bamboo works very well with sulfur, and then we have these pillars going on until they reach this lake here, where you can see the lake, well, it's been collapsed into, and we have ourselves some diorite. Also add bookshelves or other associated things into nearby lakes that things have collapsed into. So now we have this, and we're going to further decorate it. There's a bunch of ways we can do this, but the best ways I've seen are of course normal bookshelves interlaced with some chiseled, but a new method. So we can actually put in some oak stairs in order to make it look like parts that have been completely destroyed altogether and aren't really bookshelves anymore. Then we can have some moss hanging into this to show it's really getting overgrown. And we can have one part that is in good condition to show how the structure was originally meant to be. That tells more of a story. Now I've finished it, and we can see a bunch of stuff's going on. We have, of course, lanterns and spikes on this. We have the bamboo shelves and floor patterns using a bunch of diorite, quartz pillars, and chiseled quartz. Then we can have statues. You can use armor stands with trims, good way to use up those trims. And then we have ourselves a little tree growing here, a little mangrove, although in my head this is Brazilian pepper. Then we have ourselves going across that floor, guides your eyes to the enchanting setup, and of course those ruined bookshelves I was talking about. Pots with your pottery shards on them are really good, so incorporate those when possible. And then the enchanting setup, you can see the carpet is now drooping into the water. Almost. This really sells the idea that, well, it's carpet. So be sure to incorporate all those little things. We have the cinnabar pillars poking up through ground where the moss is covering it. And then with the bookshelves, and then the chiseled ones, and then the oak. Make sure that when using stairs, none of the unused blocks like stone or sulfur in the background are visible, because otherwise that shows that it's being built rather than a naturally generated structure. It ruins immersion. So we have our books in there, and now we have ourselves the wool structure done, which means we are effectively done with this part of the build. While you can continually add on to this megabase as long as you have room, you can excavate into walls, you can even use the ceiling. There's so many things that you could hypothetically do that I'm going to leave it up to you. Instead, let's really finish up this build by adding in some background elements. Back to the sinkhole here, let's make sure that it's actually using sulfur, so that way it blends in with the rest of the build. And of course the watercolor, don't put animals in here. Don't do axolotls, because of course that doesn't look safe, especially since we have that big geyser in the middle of the build. So now we make this into a proper sinkhole, and let's build some structures around it to make it look destroyed. So now once we do that, we interlace it all across the build, and what do you know? We have that same style going on with our library, except it's been completely overtaken with moss, and some of it has fallen into that sinkhole. Additionally, we have these statues here completely ruined, and we also have some calcite diorite, which works very well for adding in a very nice floor pattern. So now we have some ruins here, very indescript. You can add more details to them. Maybe they're overgrown, maybe these ones were another blacksmith rather than their actual forge, things like that. And then you can even illustrate the cleanup effort with boxes with open lids using trapdoors and shelves. Right here, our build for the person who is actually trying to repair this, and then on those little unused areas, we can see all sorts of destroyed structures, maybe even little crops that have been unharvested for ages, things like that. When you do this, it really tells a story with your build. So let's continue that with landscaping. We have some firefly bushes here, and that's the cornerstone of what you want to do. We have trees growing around. They're basically just azaleas with stripped mangrove and mangrove leaves. We have tons of flowers in patches. Wildflowers are a great one. The grass color here is a little odd, but still, I recommend using it. And then of course, hide lights using moss carpet. Remove any places that are unfinished to make sure that it doesn't ruin the immersion. And what do you know? We have a very well decorated area here. So, you might think you're done, but there's one last thing. This, of course, is not an actual sulfur cave. I just changed the biome because I wanted an easier demonstration area. But this also means that the ceiling is unfinished. So we can finish it off with a gradient. This can be really costly, but it really divides the line between I put some structures in the cave and I'm a professional builder. So here's what we do. At the top of our sulfur lining the walls, we're going to use some oak planks going into packed mud, into gray terracotta, into black concrete. And then, when we do that, it really makes it look like there could even be mountains in the distance. Of course, that's completely illogical, but it tells a story. We can have little pieces of cinnabar to make it look like distant pieces of the cave, almost like a mural of sorts. So be sure to do this all across the cave. And then, remove any glow lichen, ores, anything across the ceiling, and look at what we've gotten. The ceiling is completely black, and it makes it look a lot more open than it really is. But in doing so, we've done a lot to the build. Any holes going into the surface, don't do the gradient into it, and thus you have your mountains in the gradient. Make sure it's not completely smooth. And now, with all this done, you have a mega base now. We have those minecarts running across, we have our hydrothermal area, we have the nether portal, and then we even have our old ruin section with unknown heroes from a bygone age. So we have everything here, and we've really told a story with this build. Either way, it's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed this video, remember, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Either way, enjoy the rest of your day. Gearsaw out.